Morning, everyone. Welcome to IFSI's virtual Zoom class for Fireground Communications. My name is Dan Bracken. I am the Cook County Regional Rep. I'm going to be the moderator for today's this morning's class. We want to thank you for taking your Saturday and spending it a couple hours with us. We have some great information, two phenomenal instructors, and a couple announcements before we get rocking and rolling here. Any issues with the Zoom that you have, we can work that out. IFSI's main phone line is 217-333-3800, and we have the IFSI website, which I'll post all this stuff. Participants are eligible for a certification of attendance. In order to be eligible, you must have formally registered for the IFSI class on the IFSI website. If you didn't register, it will not record in our system. You must sign on to the virtual classroom through your Zoom account with your full name. So some of you that have a name like iPad 7 or Phil, you're not registered in our system. You need to go back and register through the Zoom account so you can get credit for the class. If you have a group of people signed in through a station, what we're going to do is we'll get that roster to us and we'll be able to get everybody their Zoom certification. It's going to take about 14 days, so it'll take a bit, but nonetheless, it's there. And I'll send all this information through on the chat. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt Burke and Steve DeYoung. They're going to be the instructors for the Fireground Communications class this morning.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Burke. I'm a captain with the Flossmoor Fire Department right outside of Chicago on the south end of Cook County. I'm a field instructor with the Illinois Fire Service Institute. I'm honored to teach in the COLLAPSE and the RIP program, as well as the Cornerstone program in the Cook County and Coleraine County region. My co-host is Steve DeYoung, and I'll let Steve introduce himself to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Steve DeYoung. I'm the deputy chief in the village of Homewood, Illinois, which is a neighboring community to Matt in the south side of Cook County, south side of Chicago. I'm also a field staff instructor with the Institute. Teaching in the NIMS program a lot and a few other programs, but we're happy to have you this morning and talk about Fireground communication and maybe clear up some of the confusion that we end up with on the Fireground today as we go forward.
So without further ado, we're going to start with the program. So we're in the Fireground communications. So one of the toughest things in the fire service we do is, or have trouble doing, is communicating. And with most NIOSH reports, which we'll discuss here in a little while, it discusses our inability to communicate effectively. So our hope with this program is that we can bring some new ideas to you, new ways to train on communications, and use it to our advantage, and be transparent with everybody we come across, because ideally that's what it's about. So what is communication? It's exchanging information between two people, whether it's between writing, verbalizing, or other means. So interpersonal communication has 4 parts. You have the communicator, the person that's portraying the message to everybody that's listening. We have the receiver. The receiver is going to be the person or people that are listening to the message. The perceptual screens is going to be how we decipher that information, and then the message is what we want everybody to know. How do we communicate? Well, on the Fireground, we have several different ways of communicating. Obviously, the most important, or the biggest one that we're going to do, is radio communication. If we're inside the building, we don't have the means to have face-to-face conversation, we rely on our radios. So our radios are something that we need to train on, we need to practice on, and that's a form for us of verbal communication. Face-to-face communication, which is probably one of the best ways to communicate, is having that face-to-face communication, is also another form of verbal communication. And by having face-to-face communication, we're allowing people to read our body language, read our tone, and physically see our demeanor, so they can interpret our message. And then lastly, which is nonverbal, is our body language and gestures. And we all have ways that we can communicate with our body language or gestures or even our appearance that will help portray some type of message that we're trying to put out there. Why do we communicate? Well, we communicate for a couple of reasons. One, we're searching for a desired outcome. It's, hey, you, it's me. Here's my problem. Here's what I need to fix it. And it's achieving a mutual understanding. So by achieving the mutual understanding and reaching our desired outcome, we're hoping that whatever our issue is or whatever we're trying to resolve can be resolved in a timely fashion.
Hey, Matt.
Yes, Steve.
So this part here of actually achieving the mutual understanding to reach a desired outcome, it seems to be where we as firefighters end up kind of losing the message, whether it's the way it was delivered or whether it was the way that we received it. So what we want to do throughout today is to try to clear up sending that message, receiving that message between, and it's not an incident command class today, but a lot of the communication when we're talking about Fireground or fire operations is between the person in charge and the person doing the task. And when that message gets confused or misunderstood, that's where we run into problems.
So, as we all know from the start of the time, we've always had ways to communicate. So Steve's going to talk about briefly a few things that we've used over the time in the fire service to help communicate not only the transmission of alarm, but the receipt of alarm and how we respond.
So in the history of the fire service, as a lot of us know, we've got telephones and radios have gone way back, and technology has really come very far in the recent times to help us get better with communicating like that. Telephone was always common. Anytime we're talking about communication and the Fireground, is we're talking about dispatch. So telephones are still used today to receive the message. Radios relay that message. In the 1800s, it started out in Boston with the fireboxes. Those were a one-way means of communication to where the fire department got a message, received the message, but didn't necessarily know what that message was. There wasn't any notes with it. There wasn't any, it was just, there was a location and they would respond to that location, and then they would figure out what they're dealing with at that location or somewhere near that location of that firebox. So technology has helped us to actually get the message out and give us as responders a clearer message of what we're responding to and a better idea of where we're going, which has helped us in the receipt of the alarm and communicating back and forth to get more information, which they didn't have back then.
So periodically what we come across, especially in volunteers or rural areas, is walk-ins or somebody that's calling the fire station directly. So how do we deal with those? We have to get the appropriate information, and we need to ensure that those calls are being handled properly. So, one of the things that we need to do is get that appropriate information to the dispatch center so that they can get that information paged out to the emergency responders. So how are we being alerted? We have our voice, pagers, house bells, telephones. Also in volunteer stations, they could have whistles, sirens, air horns, things that notify people while they're at home, whether it's they're calling back their house or the sirens. As of late, in the past 15, 20 years, we've allowed technology to also be used to have for the unstaffed stations, so we can send calls directly via apps, text messages, right to people's phones, so that they can provide the callback staffing to stations. So, how do we start off with our day or our training night? Right, we want to start off with a roll call. So usually we're going to start this at the beginning of each shift, and really it starts right before shift when you're doing your reliefs, and your relief person is giving you a rundown of what they did the day before. And then it kind of goes into a more formal roll call where the officer meets with the firefighters and expresses the expectations for the day or the shift. And it also ensures accountability, that all members are present and accounted for. and that any quick drill that could be done, or SOGs that need to be reviewed, or any pertinent information that's happened in the time you've been off can be relayed to the members so that they're well informed and able to make good decision making.
So from the administration side of and the chief side of roll call, we look at this honestly as really the most important communication part of the day. It sets you as an officer up for success, exchanging information between your relief. Engineers up for success, or chauffeurs, what's in service, what's out of service, what's responding, is any equipment missing. That exchange sets up that officer to have a good conversation with their shift. And the better communication you have at roll call is gonna assign your day. I know in our departments right now, this is where we assign riding positions. This is where we assign the duties for the day. This is where we assign who's gonna be responsible for what tasks if anything came up. So in the receipt of the alarm, there's not a lot of confusion. Everybody knows what they're doing. Everyone knows where they're going, and they know what they're assigned to. And it really prevents any of the confusion of people not knowing what they're supposed to do.
One of the ways that we can use roll calls in the volunteer world is technology. If you have the ability to use technology to your favor, you can use it as seeing who's available during the day or at night. If you have appropriate drivers, appropriate paramedics, appropriate officers, appropriate amount of personnel to make calls. There are apps and things out there that we can use to our advantage as volunteers. Also, like I stated before, at the start of maybe training night, most volunteer departments have a training night or a training day at some point across the month. We can implement a roll call at the start of that to relay this information to the organization or to the members that are participating at that point in time. Like Steve said, determine our daily assignments or things that we need to accomplish before or after training. Any changes to equipment, things that are out of service, in service, that need to be cleaned. And most importantly, defining the expectations for not only that training, but for calls that come in and defining the writing assignments for that night.
And for the, hold that slide real quick, Matt. For the volunteer departments, with the technology that Matt had mentioned, the different apps, different things that are out there, it can also help you as officers or as chiefs or even as other firefighters of knowing who's available. The technology has really helped us. We know we've worked with volunteers. Our department, both of our departments, were volunteer for a long time, and you never really know. One of the big confusion points is who's actually available to respond if you get that alarm. If you're a responding volunteer and you're going from home and you don't know how many of your members are available, it might prompt you to start looking for mutual or auto aid, which we'll get into shortly, but at least you know what you have available for that type of call.
So this is an example of a writing assignment board from Steve's department. So it lays out the expectations of each person on shift that day between the officer, the driver, and the backstop fireman. So it's just kind of a way that you define expectations to your personnel. They see where they're riding for the day, what their assignments are going to be based on what the officer has put out. And as well as if you have callback or you come back, you can see kind of who was on these vehicles. So you kind of have that accountability aspect for the people that are on the vehicles. Here's an example of writing assignments. So a lot of times, we're not sure what kind of tools should we take, what kind of tools should we not take. So this is just kind of like a defined expectation that we kind of use in our area for an engine company, okay? So ideally, we don't want everybody to have the same tool selection. We want to diversify the tool selection and make sure that we have a strong complement of tools for the job we're gonna do. So, we may not be taking a 10-pound sledgehammer into a wood frame house, but we might need that 10-pound sledgehammer in a commercial or industrial building. So here's a basic writing assignments for the residential home. The driver's gonna have his radio. The officer's gonna have a radio, his or her hand light, a halogen bar, a thermal imager. All right. In the event in a short-staffed department that the officer has to revert to taking an incident command responsibility, he or she should really be passing that thermal imager and that halogen bar off to the senior fireman. The firefighter, what's that?
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
The firefighter behind the driver typically will have a 6-foot hook and a hand light, and then the pipeman will typically have some kind of striking tool and or pump can, typically.
And really, regardless of what type of department you have, we've posted these in our vehicles for years. You might be a multi-station jurisdiction, and based on your still area and someone else maybe floats over or relieves somebody in a different station, and you have different needs based on what you know in your still area. If you have a newer firefighter or someone that comes in to relieve somebody else that isn't familiar with the area, their tools on that rig might be different than the tools in their still area. So this isn't just for a career, a volunteer department or a combination department that's swapping people regularly. It could also be something where you communicate the needs as an officer of what tools you know that you're going to need based on your type of area, the building construction in your area, and the needs that you know.
And Steve brings up a good point, and we'll talk about it here in a little while, is having the ability to call an audible, but relaying that audible to the other members of your company so that they know, like, hey, I didn't grab a striking tool, I grabbed another hook to pull ceiling based on your assignment. So just knowing what tools you have available, how they work, and making sure that you have a diverse complement to support your roles or your tasks on the fireground. So receiving alarm. Obviously, this is a lot of policy and guideline driven information, right? How are we going to receive the alarm, and what are we going to do with that information? So obviously, we want to identify ourselves and our organization. We want to try and take control of that conversation. So if somebody calls the firehouse with an emergency, we want to try and calm that person, control the conversation, and gather the accurate information that's going to provide us the means to respond to them. So what kind of emergency are we going to? What's the location? How many people are involved? All right, location of victims. This gets into that last scene point. Were they in a building that's on fire? Were they in a building that collapsed? Were they in a vehicular accident? Did the car go into water? Did somebody jump from a bridge into a creek or a river? Is it something that we have to triangulate that last scene point to try and help search and rescue that person in an appropriate amount of time? Be prepared to take messages, whether you have a pad of paper, something, be able to write down the information. Deliver the messages to either your officer and or the dispatch or communication center in a prompt fashion. Do you know the phone number to the communication center? And then you always want to try and be the last one to hang up, so that way the conversation has ended, so that you can take the next appropriate steps. So
and
this
is
hey,
Matt, back up
yes,
real quick. And we know that today most 99% of our alarms are coming in through a dispatch center, and I think it's really important to have a good relationship with your dispatch center if you can. Our department, we're lucky enough that we can actually send our newer firefighters in to spend a little bit of time with the dispatchers to understand the complexity of their job. Too many times it's easy for responders to blame the dispatch center for not getting enough information, to not receive, we don't really know what's going on here. You gave us the wrong information. You gave us, and if you've ever sat in there and had the opportunity to and understand how hard it is sometimes to get information out of someone that's in a crisis, and get that information relayed as accurately and as quickly as possible to the responders, it's not always that easy. And we as firefighters, and we as even EMS, it's easy for us to blame them, but having that relationship with the dispatch center to be able to review calls, review audio on both sides will help you better communicate your needs. Knowing the questions to answer if the call comes into the station, and get that information and you relay that back to them, only smooths out the communication and the clarity of what we need and what we expect to see when we arrive on scene.
Next, we're going to talk about mutual aid versus automatic aid. All right. And the big thing here is to know the difference. So typically with automatic aid, when you get a report of a fire, those people are getting dispatched at the same time as you. It's it's most likely going to be communities or districts that are neighboring you and that you know. The ideal thing to do with these is to get on the same page, have training at least, you know, monthly, or at least once a month where you're training with these people, and know and portray expectations from those communities. And then there's mutual aid. Mutual aid is typically going to be from a little bit further away. This is going to help supplement larger scale incidents that are maybe more than what you and your automatic aid communities can handle. So identifying the difference between the two is important, because you need to know when you need to call for resources. So typically on a large scale incident or in a rural water supply situation, you might want to get that water or those resources on the road as soon as possible to help supplement your incident, so you're not lacking water or constantly losing water and having to wait for the next tender to get there to dump water into your tank, and you're constantly starting over. So getting the resources on the road immediately, knowing where the resources are coming from, and kind of gauging in your mind, you know, the time frame it's going to take for those resources to arrive at your incident. MABAS,
Hey,
MABAS is, Steve, you go ahead.
A little bit on that other slide. One of the things that our departments, and because Matt and I border each other, one of the things that we've worked hard on over the last several years is to, and we'll talk about it a little bit more as we go through this, but with your, especially with automatic aid or even with mutual aid that you know is regularly coming to you, it's important to sit down and communicate the expectations that Matt had mentioned, but more about what are the expectations of the first arriving apparatus. What does the first engine do? What's the first truck assignment? What's the second engine? If you're a rural volunteer department, who's given water supply? Where are you going to set that up? And knowing that helps the incident commander focus on the incident. He knows that he or she knows that the first arriving assignments are automatically going to go to work based on the SOGs and based on what you've agreed upon. And he or she doesn't have to start assigning basic tasks to meet the incident. And we're going to expound on that a little bit more as we go through. But that early communication before the incident really helps build a safer fire ground.
So MABAS is, at least in Illinois and surrounding states, it's a way to request additional resources. So here, we need to know the procedures and the policies for requesting those assets or resources from MABAS. So MABAS typically, you know, larger scale incidents will provide boats, sonars, MVU units, specialty equipment like that can be used for larger scale incidents, TRT, hazmat. So that's typically what MABAS is going to provide, you know, and then failure to follow these guidelines adds confusion. So if you don't know how to request these resources, or you're not sure, or you've never been taught, it's going to delay the receipt of the assets, as well as, you know, add additional confusion to the incident. So Steve's going to talk about the NIOSH 5 and how they provide confusion or failures on the fire ground.
So one of the parts about the NIOSH 5 and about NIOSH that we really want to focus on is that out of all the NIOSH reports that are out there that I've read or anyone else has read, one of the consistent failures that is noted on these NIOSH reports in a line of duty death is inadequate communications on the fire ground. That's always mentioned as one of them. And why is that? Because communication is difficult. It's that sending of the message, the receipt of the message, and then trying to come up with that mutually agreed upon task. But we seem to, for years and years and years, as far back as I've read NIOSH reports, we always fail in the communications, or it's noted that there was a breakdown or failure. So part of what we want to look at with this is, how do we eliminate that breakdown? How do we try to close that gap and get communication failure out of the NIOSH reports by training on sending a clear message, receiving a clear message, and then mutually acting on that message in the appropriate way. Next slide. NIOSH also references some of the issues that have come up with on why these firefighters had led to dying, asphyxiation, trauma. A lot of the asphyxiation or trauma is due to being in an atmosphere where they were lost and the communication failed and they couldn't get out, or they waited too long to communicate for a mayday. Trauma usually ends up being a building collapse because maybe we didn't recognize and communicate the building conditions or the fire conditions to appropriately communicate the fact that we need to back out, we need to move out quickly. And as we kind of go into maydays and other stuff like that, a lot of times when someone's in a panic, that communication isn't heard or it's missed completely. So communication leads to these causes of death based on not being able to get the message clearly through. Maybe the firefighters inside did not get the message to evacuate. And this is what we want to, as we move forward, of how we look at our technology, how we look at our radios, and how we look at how we communicate on the Fireground should hopefully help eliminate this in the future if we can.
So if you're implementing some of what the NIOSH 5 is saying, it helps reduce the number of incidents where firefighters get in trouble or injured, and even further, killed in the line of duty. So taking some of this into account and implementing it into your training system will help reduce your exposure to injury and even death. As long as you're proactive and safe and you have a good training program in place that helps hammer home the importance of communication and communicating effectively, it's going to help you and your organization. So with our SOGs and SOPs, incident command worksheets don't put out fire. The fireman and good communication puts out the fire. All right. If we're portraying or conveying our message clearly and effectively, it's going to allow the incident commander to provide us resources to mitigate our incident. So if we use this information correctly on a daily basis and even a shift basis, it's going to reduce our exposure to problematic issues. So think about how, even as a quick drill or part of your roll call, how you can implement a communication drill into this. Whether it's operating the radio with a gloved hand, changing the channel with a gloved hand, activating your emergency button with a gloved hand, something along those lines, but knowing how to efficiently and effectively communicate your message. Again, training. So you'll hear us talk a lot about training throughout this program, and training is ideally the most responsible thing as firefighters and officers and command staff that we can do. So with every drill, we should be able to implement a communications portion into our training, whether it's giving acting officers the ability to function in a car, or firefighters that may act up as a company officer, the ability to be in charge for that specific training. It helps us define our expectation and it utilizes that experience to give us proper decision-making on the Fireground. So implement it into training as much as you can.
And as Matt has, it's always difficult as firefighters to make mistakes, but this is where the mistakes really need to be made. And our departments have taken a big stride in adding communication and size ups. Most of us all have SOGs. We have, this is what we want to hear in a size up. This is how we want to do things. But unless you actually practice those size ups, have someone review it. Even in training, we've gone as far as, because we do have a good relationship with our dispatch center, is getting the audio back from them so that the firefighters and even the officers can hear what they sound like on the radio. They can hear the message, they can hear how their voice sounds, and you got to practice it. We're in a great position with the technology of today that we've got YouTube and we've got all these other pictures and stuff on the internet that you can just pull up pictures during training and look at even your newest firefighter. Give me a size up. On the volunteer side, you never know probably who's going to be the first one on scene. So if you have an expectation of how they're supposed to relay their size up, if they don't practice it, they're probably going to fail it under pressure. All of us, myself, Matt, We've all failed on size ups. We've failed on communication under pressure and under the adrenaline of actually showing up on a call. But practice will help you get through that calmly.
And that's the point, you know, even volunteers to the largest fire department in the country is defined expectations, you know, having a good set of guidelines and policies in place that give somebody that potentially is acting outside of their rank a playbook to work off of. Our incident command system. So it doesn't take place of strategy and tactics. All right. It should ideally be supporting the needs of the incident. We want our officers to be thinkers, and they evaluate the building or their incident on a consistent basis, whether it be through building construction, the behavior of the smoke or the fire conditions like Rich Stack talked about a couple of weeks ago. You know, really focusing or you know, applying their attention to their surroundings and knowing what's going on. Again, you know, we don't want to micromanage as incident commanders. We really want to support the task level workers and make sure that they have the resources necessary to be successful. So, you know, this is the old, we risk a lot to save a lot. We risk a little to save a little, all right? And we risk nothing to save nothing. We really need to think about that in the sense of we have to be mindful of our actions. You know, we have consequences to everything we do. If there's a viable victim that can be saved, and we're going to have to do event on our search to get to that person, that's where we're going to risk a little bit more to save somebody. Right? If we risk our lives a little in a highly calculated, controlled manner, we're going to save property too. So if you pull up and you have a heavily involved building with fire coming out of every window and it's an absolutely defensive from the word go, that's probably going to be a time where we're going to maybe take a step back and get control of the incident before we put ourselves in a little bit greater of a risk. But a lot of that's going to be depicted or based off of our training, our knowledge, and our ability to read the building, the fire conditions, the smoke conditions, and the construction type, and realizing whether or not there is a go or no go time there. So when we arrive on the scene, we want to know where are we going? Where is the fire going? You know, where could potentially our assignment be for the first due truck or the first due engine or the second due engine? It's kind of allowing those resources to almost self-deploy with predetermined SOGs and procedures in place. Set up a solid command structure. Make sure somebody's in control of the incident from outside the building. And if you're in an incident where you have a rescue to be made and you need to pass command, that's fine. But that means of passing command to the next officer needs to be clearly portrayed or put over the radio, so that without a doubt, the next company in knows that the officer is going to have to take command and start allocating resources and determining and providing a safe fire ground for those people to be working on.
And what helps set up that solid command structure is the training and the preparation beforehand of anticipating what and knowing and assigning your companies and their assignments prior to. As an incident commander pulling up to a scene, there's a lot going through your mind. You got to communicate for some help. You're going to communicate for other assignments that might have to be done. But if you can take that task through training and through communicating your desire, the company's actions prior to, it takes that stress off the incident commander. I think we've all heard audio somewhere. You can find it somewhere. When an incident commander is trying to give a size up, also give assignments, try to call for help, and all of that on top of one another almost instantaneously because they're hit with an incident. That's where communication gets missed. Either the assignment isn't clearly relayed, then the assignment isn't clearly understood, and things go wrong. If that communication happens prior to arriving on, and the first companies can just go to work, the incident commander has accountability because of the morning conversation as to how many are on each rig. It allows he or she to start focusing on the assistance and further into the incident instead of focusing on the now tasks, if that makes sense.
Like like we've been saying, the incident commander shouldn't be determining your tactics and strategy, but they should be listening to the tactics and strategy by the task level workers, your company officers, your interior officers, your sector officers, and trying to expect what their next needs is going to be, and making sure that they have the ability to obtain those resources. So the company officers, their mode of operation is directly involved in the incident. They're in the incident, they're in the hot zone, they're working, and they're accountable for the people that they're working with. So typically that's 3 to 6 feet of area that they can effectively manage with their people. And, you know, and think about that. They're stretching lines, they're cutting holes, they're in the hot zone. So their area of awareness is typically 3 to 6 feet, and that's typically where their people are going to be able to work. Now, there's going to be times where you may have orders that allow your company to separate or split off 2 and 2, or you leave your driver and 2 firefighters go into a building, or you have only 2 people on a rig. You know, you have to split and make decisions based off of that. Whatever your manpower is, you need to have a guide in place that you know that the person that's in the hot zone that's in charge is typically, they're only aware of what's happening within 3 to 6 feet of them. So the missing link in most structured fires at the tactical level is our division supervisors or our sector officers. All right, their span of knowledge or sphere of operation is typically between 20 and 50 feet. So if you think about the typical residential home, that's one side of the building. All right, and they can funnel resources in and out of the building based on their assignment. So, you know, in my opinion, the interior officer is probably a priority second, and with the C sector officer, getting eyes to the rear of the building and getting a command level set of eyes into the building to help organize the chaos inside and control the needs and the wants of the officers or the people working inside the hot zone. And then from there, you can go into your B sector and D sector and start helping the incident commander or the officers delegate their responsibilities and control their needs. And by doing this, it's going to help allow funneling of communication through specific officers, and then they'll decipher what the true needs are and then ask command for it. Because if the officer inside is directly talking to command and saying, hey, we need a second line, well, if the C sector officer already has a second line back there, that information could have been funneled without having to hamper the needs or the abilities of command to do their job as well. So truly knowing how your incident is being set up, listening to your communication, and funneling the proper communication through the proper people as your incident is set up.
And I think it might have been on the before we get into the division of soup. On one of the former slides, one of the notes that was on there was incident commanders should not be micromanaging an incident. That comes down to communication, and it comes down to trust of that incident commander and their officers. If what the officer inside is communicating back to command isn't matching up with what command is seeing, there's a breakdown of communication. Too many times an interior officer might ask for more time. They might ask for, oh, give me another minute, boss. Give me another 2 minutes, boss. But what's being relayed from the outside isn't matching what's being relayed from the inside. And that trust factor has to be there. The incident commander, you know, if they're seeing something bad and they call you out, you can't question that, and you can't delay coming out. But also, if the incident commander trusts the company officer and he says, I've got it, boss, give me another minute. If that trust factor is there, they're going to give you that minute. Incident commanders start micromanaging when things aren't matching up, and they're starting to get fearful of what the next step is, because there's a breakdown of communication between what's being seen and what's being heard. Go ahead.
So the division supervisor becomes the eyes and ears for the incident commander. Like we said, they're helping funnel proper information in and out. As Steve was saying, if what the incident commander isn't, if what the incident commander is seeing isn't being supported by what they're being told, that's when we run into problems and start to have that that micromanaging aspect. So really, if through training and through relationships being built, you know, if you're being told to get out of the building because, you know, there's 40-foot flames coming out of the roof and you're not seeing that, you have to rely on the words of the incident commander or the sector officers to be pulled out, as well as they need to be relying on you to say, hey, you know, we really truly are making progress in here. We're opening up ceiling, we're opening up walls, we got 2 lines working, we're making progress, and they can see that progress being made. That's also helping manage the incident as well through communication. So having true good communications and being filtered out properly is really and ideally what we're looking for. So the 3 different zones. So typically your incident commander is going to be in the cold zone. They're going to be away from the incident, typically in some kind of command vehicle, making decisions based off of what they're being told. Your division or group supervisors are typically going to be right on the outside of the building. They're going to be your warm zone. They're going to be a channel of, they're going to be part of that command structure that's making decisions and communicating directly with the people in the hot zone, which would be your company officers or your interior officers. So the goal of incorporating is not to create a top-heavy command structure, but to help support the incident. So by being able to have those people out there, it's supporting our tasks and supporting what we're doing on the Fireground. And again, it's helping prevent any of the NIOSH 5 from taking place. We can't stress enough, we don't want incident commanders or bosses to micromanage, but we want them to support the troops. And part of that's going to be successful by, again, building relationships, having a successful training program, and being on a you know, having a good relationship with each other.
And as a boss, and especially as an incident commander, you can only manage so much. It goes back to the span of control that we talk about in other trainings, stuff like that. You can only, as one person, really start receiving clear information from so many people. If you're starting to get overwhelmed with the communication that's coming in because the roof sector is talking to you, you're in a multi-story building, you've got 4 or 5 different floors talking to you, you've got the C sector officer talking to you, you as an individual cannot properly process all that information. That's where you as an incident commander have got to start looking for help, requesting help so that you can kind of tone down and break up the communication that's coming to into you from 1 or 2 or 3 people versus 7 or 8 people coming in, so that you can properly get a picture of what's going on without being overwhelmed with so many people talking to you.
And again, you know, if you're that interior officer, that command officer, and you got a company officer from inside the building calling directly to command, again, you got to control that incident and make sure that they're funneling the proper information through the proper channels set up in place through your command structure. So,
Hey, Matt, Steve.
yeah.
We got a question here. So the topic that what you just said, the question was, what benchmarks should be relayed from interior to incident command, and why are they important?
So I know we're coming up to benchmarks here shortly. Just hold on 1 second, and hopefully we can hit the benchmarks from a couple different sources as we get into it and clear that up.
Is that okay, Dan?
Absolutely.
All right. So again, critical factors, changing smoke conditions, and being able to communicate. Again, if what we're saying isn't jiving with the commander's seeing, that's where we run into problems. So what as company officers or as firefighters, what everybody needs to realize is that when you're in the hot zone working, you're pulling line, you're pulling ceiling, you know, you're forcing doors, you're doing searches, you're doing task level work in the hot zone. You're not focused on the 10,000 yard view. You're focused on the 5-yard view. So it's important to realize that you have somebody that you trust on the outside looking out for your best interests. And if they're asking you to come out, it's time to come out. So as firefighters, one of the hardest things it is being told to back out and that we've lost. We always want to win. We always want to be aggressive. We always want to be on the offensive, but sometimes we are in a losing battle, and we have to recognize that the people from the outside are pulling us out. Now, we hope that the people on the outside that are making these decisions and communicating them to us are also training with us, and that we can, and that's where that trust factor comes in. So the first member on the scene is like the quarterback, all right? They're gonna be the ones that are making the plays and making the shot calls, all right? So they use and are using their guidelines and their policies and their real life experience as their playbook, all right? But we also wanna make sure that they have the ability to call an audible and, you know, make game time decisions as they see them. As we all know, no two incidents are the same, and every time we go to a house fire, it's different. But there are some things that are similar. Building construction, you know, fire load, things of that we need to know are based on agency specifics and their jurisdictions. You know, in my area, we don't have a lot of Chicago bungalows. We have a lot of lightweight construction and a lot of like small size mansions. So our tactics are going to be different than other people's, but realizing your jurisdiction and the jurisdictions you're responding to and how they function is going to help that person make decisions. So some guidelines that we can follow, and I think Dan might have posted this, or Dan can post it for everybody, and it's just kind of like a little cheat sheet for communication. You know, the hey you, it's me, you know, so command from interior, taking that break, letting the commander, interior go ahead, interior from command go ahead, and having that dialect or that dialogue with each other in a controlled manner, not screaming on the radio, not talking softly when there's chaos around you, but realizing that you have to have that hey you, it's me controlled conversation. Try to limit the use of 10 codes or jargon that isn't common amongst your agency or the agencies working on your Fireground. Stick to common language, stick to common things that are understood by all people operating on the incident. And we'll dive into these a little bit more as we traverse through this lecture. But you know, some goals that we want to look at for response are life safety, our incident stabilization, our property conservation. Our tactics is going to be our search and rescue, protection of exposures, confining the fire, and then some of the benchmarks are going to be our all clear, our under control, and our lost stop. So I'm sure Dan just posted that, so you guys can take a look at that, print it out, save it, and see how it works with your agency. So for here, you got two different style of houses. All right, you got a ranch on a slab, and you got a larger home, so like a smaller mansion. All right, so knowing how to give that proper size up between the two is going to be a big win for us, right? So on the top, we're going to have, you know, we're on scene, engine 19, we're on scene, westbound, 1 story, single family. We got nothing showing. We're going to be investigating. All right, just knowing how to pull up and do those sets of reps and fine tune your skills. And everybody, like Steve said earlier, everybody has access mostly to the internet and be able to pick up pictures. And even if you don't have the internet, you can go out in your jurisdiction, take pictures of different structures and use them for quick drills, use them for your training exercises, use it for company officers or acting officers to do trial size ups, right? Knowing your area and how to do that stuff, that's where this communication guideline is going to come in. And then expanding and having discussions based off the different buildings. So the Fireground as we know it today versus 20, 30 years ago is completely different, right? Every Fireground is dynamic. Things change. Things change with wrong tactics, improper ventilation, improper deployment of hose lines. So knowing your building construction, knowing, you know, fire behavior, the loads that are in the structures, how synthetics are being used more than the legacy, you know, with that whole legacy versus modern. Changes in our staffing levels, you know, especially in the volunteer world, you might be pushing out with 1 or 2 people on a rig, and how is that going to affect your Fireground? You know, PPE, not everybody can afford, you know, brand new PPE, and how are we going to overcome not having maybe an SCBA for everybody? And, how can we still utilize those people to our advantage? Knowing that and knowing how to overcome those is what's going to make us successful, regardless of what kind of organization we're working in. So training on the Fireground communications is going to be a key factor in making sure we're consistent in our operations. So, really hammering home the need for training is very important. And, every time we read a NIOSH report on a line of duty death, communication is always a factor. And in life, communication, verbal communication, face-to-face communication, face-to-face confrontation, which is going to result in the need for communication, is difficult for everybody. But if we practice it and we do it and we maintain our calm, a calm atmosphere, we can overcome that and reduce our exposure to bad incidents. So command and controlling the incident, we don't want to impede the task level workers. So everybody still has a job to do, but by conveying that message to each other and having good, calm communication, it's going to allow us to have a more organized Fireground, and we're going to be able to operate more efficiently and effectively. So really, it's an adage I've heard, or a saying that I've always heard is calm breeds calm, panic breeds panic. If we're calm, the people we're talking to are going to maintain, being calm. But if we're panicked, we're yelling, we're screaming on the radio, that anxiety level of everybody on the Fireground, or everybody that's listening to you, is going to be bumped up. And now everybody's kind of got that anxiety, and it breeds a recipe for failure.
And one of the points to that is being able to communicate through an SCBA after working. There's audio out there and you can practice, but you can have an officer, or you can even have a firefighter in a car recording what you sound like trying to talk when you're when you're tired, you're gassed, maybe you just forced a door and drug a hose line up to the second floor and you're trying to relay a message through your SCBA. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand. You might think that you sound very, very clear on that. But the incident commander can't hear anything. We know today's Fireground is very dynamic, and within a minute, conditions can change. So if the incident commander or the person on the outside can't hear what you're trying to relay through your mask, whether you have an amplifier, whether you don't, it's important to practice that. Do it under stress. Do it when you're tired after you just forced a door and did a few tasks, and actually listen to it so that you can better learn how to clearly communicate through an SCBA when you need to get a message through.
Regardless of what firefighters you talk to, all of them have kind of that same mentality. They have the 5 things they want. Tell me what you want me to do. Show me how to do it. Give me the tools for the job. Get out of my way, and then critique me. All right. One thing that is hard for firefighters is constructive criticism. You always think somebody is talking down to you, or they're just beating on you because they don't like you. But really, the one way we all learn is through constructive criticism. And when I make a mistake at a fire, I know somebody like Steve is going to jump in and be like, hey, you messed up on this. Here's what you did. Here's how you can prevent that from happening in the future. And as a company officer, that's valuable information to me, because it allows me to recognize that I made a mistake that I might not have known that I did. And it allows me to be better for my troops at the next incident. So really allowing this to sit in, tell them what you want, show me how to do it, get the tools, get out of my way, and then critique me. That's really something that we need to, to think about.
And Matt talked about, criticism from the chiefs or constructive criticism from the chiefs. It doesn't really matter how many bugles you've got on your helmet or on your collar. You've got to be able to, even as a chief, you're not going to do everything right. And guys like Matt, I trust him because he'll be able to tell me, hey, Steve, you didn't make sense on this, or you didn't really clearly tell me what you wanted to do on this. So all of us, to make a safer Fireground, I don't care how many bugles you've got or how long you've been in the service, we all can learn something. and communication is very difficult for all of us. So you've got to be able to, as a chief officer, you've got to be able to take information back from your company officers to improve yourself.
So the fire chief, I think for those that don't, well, one thing we can do is delegate responsibilities, delegate roles and responsibilities and let people work. All right. Encourage creative thinking, or our firefighters or our officers or our chiefs, encourage their thinking, challenge them. All right. That's part of being challenged. Encourage the use of our firefighters, and their skill sets. Every firefighter has some kind of skill set, whether it's communication, carpentry, masonry, whatever it may be. Everybody has a skill set. And then most importantly, encourage communication, encourage transparent communication, amongst your men or your women. All right. Allowing that verbal interpersonal conversation to be had. Not everything needs to be done over text message. Not everything needs to be done over email. Sometimes the best communication is having that uncomfortable face-to-face conversation and moving forward and growing from it. So dividing the incidents, when we divide incidents, it challenges our communication process because it's going to make us have to grow our incident, and we might not necessarily have the command positions to do this. So we're going to have to utilize company officers until we can get command positions in place. So recognizing that, depending on the number of floors in the building or even number of basements in the building, depending on where the fire is at, smoke conditions, the needs of the incident, you might have to have different floors and different people responsible on each floor making decisions. And truly, when you get into an operation like this, communication is absolutely 100% key, because if we don't have a good communication process, we're going to have a breakdown in communication, and now this is where confusion starts. And furthermore, if you don't have a common language that you're using and you get very technical in your terminology, we're furthermore going to complicate the incident and have chaos. So whatever you're doing where you're at or back at home, knowing that if you could take a picture like this, if everybody has a downtown business district, with a 1 or 2 or 3-story taxpayer, how are you going to divide that incident up? And maybe that's part of your communication training, is putting a picture like this up on the screen and saying, hey, on floor 1, engine 27 is going to be the second floor office, command, and truck 28 is going to be on the 3rd floor, and engine 19 is going to be on the 4th floor. How are you delegating the responsible party to each floor? And then on top of that, the 4 sides of the building. Like I said earlier, the front of the building, the rear of the building, and the inside of the building are the most important functions, and then your sides of the building from there. But knowing what are you using as the front of the building, and how are you going to adapt this ABCD sector to correlate with your operation? And is that being broadcasted effectively to the people operating in the incident so that efficient operations can take place?
Hey, Matt, quick question. The question was, if you were to lead out from the back of this building, would it still be this depicted as this Charlie side, or would you call it the Alpha side of the building?
Well, I mean, that's going to really be dictated by your guidelines and policies, but for us, it would still be the Charlie side, because the street side for us is always going to be Alpha or A, and then the C side is always going to be the rear from the street. So yes, if you lead out from the rear of the building into the building, you just want to say you're in the rear of the building on the C side, leading out whatever line, whether it's a skid load, pre-connect, a trash line for a trash fire, but just knowing how to broadcast that so people know exactly where you're at.
And it really goes, like Matt said, it really goes down to the SOGs. I have seen a lot of departments that where the initial hose line goes automatically becomes side A. That's really communicating your policies, your procedures, having those conversations between administration and your officers of figuring out what makes the most sense. How are we going to receive that information? And is it clear and concise to everyone coming in, especially if you're relying on auto and mutual aid? Because if there's a confusion between the A and the C side based on policy between different departments that are responding to your incident, it's very easy for someone to get lost and confused.
So again, effectively communicating that first officer or that first engine company or the first tender or the first truck company on the scene, whatever that suppression unit is, it's just, you know, putting that, broadcasting that message out. Hey, we're not in the front of the building. We're in the rear of the building. You know, we got, you know, rear porches on fire or whatever the case may be of what you're seeing. And that's where the initial attack operation is going to be taking place from. Does that make sense? So good communications, a major goal of communications is initiate, maintain, and then control your incident communications. You know, it's very simple for us to say that, but we can all relate to a fireground that we've been on that was just pure chaos. So truly having somebody that can take control and maintain control of the incident will provide us good communication. So some things that get in the way from good communication is, you know, we all can relate to somebody that's on an ego trip. And I just read something about on the chat about, you know, some of us have weak officers that may not want to make decisions and things like that. This is kind of those guidelines of we all can relate to the messages on this page of people getting in the way, you know, but truly having conversation or communications or that interpersonal face-to-face conversation is not always easy, but sometimes you gotta have that uncomfortable conversation to kind of mitigate these issues of the person that won't stop talking, the person that knows it all, the person on an ego trip. Somebody's got to take ownership and have that uncomfortable conversation, so that way we can always maintain our communication process. You know, predictable communication problems that some of us can relate to, some or all of them, is lack of policy, lack of guidelines. Again, that excitement, that anxiety on the radio, the yelling, the screaming, you know, trying to figure out how we can fix that. Our organization problem. Again, in NIOSH reports, they're in almost every NIOSH report, and it's, you know, communication can be seen as the fall guy, but really, you know, it's something that we truly in the fire service need to do better on. Equipment problems, you know, your radios, not knowing how to use your radio is not being programmed properly. The wearing of your radio and exposing it to high heat and, you know, thermal damage. And then the techniques for your ability to communicate, you know, the level of your voice, the choice of your words, timing, excitement, all of that stuff. Again, you know, this is all stuff that's predictable that can be fixed through your training program. So the incident command and the tactical level leader's presence comes over the radio. So you're announcing that, you know, 2800 is going to be in command in the front of the building. So you're announcing who is command and where that command position is going to be located. You know, the front of the building, again, this is going to go back to your guidelines and your policies of what does the front of the building mean? Some people may think that that means standing in front of the building on a portable radio. Some people might mean that's a car backed into a driveway across the street or next to the house in a rural area with the chief officer or command officer in it taking command. Knowing that verbiage and that communication is what's going to allow you to know who's in charge. Again, you know, when we get into our interior officers, you know, truck 2804 officer is going to be in command, knowing that who that person is and knowing that that truck officer is the interior officer will help funnel your communications in and out of the building. Again, screamers, we don't like listening to screamers. We can all relate to somebody that screamed on the radio, that's gotten way too excited. Think about what you're going to say. Take a deep breath. You know, think about what you're saying. As you're responding to the fire, if you know you're going to be the first in officer, you know typically where you're going, all right? Think about the building construction. Start, you know, thinking about your tactics and your your size up and things of that nature in your head as you're going, and in controlling your breathing like we would do if we got an issue with our SCBA, truly controlling our breathing and giving a clear and concise message. Because again, if you're the screamer or you know somebody that is a screamer, we usually tune them out, and we can't have that. We got to have calm breathing, calm, and panic breeds panic. So we got to maintain our calmness. Sorry. The incident commander, capture and control the communication. We've said this a couple times now. Remain available on the first radio call. You know, one of the hardest things for an incident commander, and Steve can say, talk more about this, is you have to monitor multiple radio frequencies, and that's going to be, based on your jurisdictional aspects. You might have 4 different radio channels that you have to function on. You have to monitor those channels. If you have auto-aid companies coming in that aren't on the same frequency or don't have radios that operate on your frequency, having the means of giving them communication is also going to help control the communications process.
And I know, like Richie had talked about in the last class, understanding the different communications as between jurisdictions. For us, we're in the south suburbs of Chicago, but Chicago is on a digital frequency, or digital, however that works. So the suburban departments coming into the city are not able to communicate to Chicago just based on how their communication is set up. So if you're in a rural area and you're going multiple jurisdictions or maybe other counties over, it's important to know and understand the different communication hurdles you have to get through to clearly communicate. Do you have to have radios available on scene for incoming companies to communicate with incident command and vice versa? Overcoming these problems before the incident and working through them through SOGs, SOPs is going to help you just run a smoother and safer Fireground.
I just saw in the chat, Jay Jones said, choice of words sometimes don't make sense, and that's true. And that's where truly having a good training program and practicing your communication is really going to help make sense of words sometimes. Again, some additional communication tips: remain available. And this goes even for not only the incident commander, but the company officers or the acting officers, whoever that responsible party is that's going to talk on the radio. If you're on a 2-man or 3-man company and you're pulling a 2.5 through a building, the officer can't just drop what he's doing to talk on the radio. So maybe that's a quick, I'll get with you in a second, I'm busy. And then the incident commander should know, hey, this person's leading down to 2.5. They'll get back to me. But just letting them know, I got your message, I'll be in touch in a minute. And then keep doing what you're doing. But making sure you go back to that message and acknowledging it and having that dialogue with the incident commander. If the incident commander loses control, they've lost their communication process. They've lost the incident. So truly that incident commander needs to be removed from the incident, have that 10,000-yard view, and make decisions based off of what's being told to him or her from the inside and what they're seeing from the outside. All right. And again, I've said it a couple times now. If you're calm, it's going to breed calmness. And if you're panicking, it's going to breed panic. So truly maintain composure and take that deep breath and think about what you're going to say before you say it, and try and minimize your excitement. Functional communication requires discipline. Everything we do in the fire service is based on discipline. If you don't need to be talking on the radio, don't talk on the radio. Not everybody in the company needs to have their volume at max volume. The company officer is truly the one that needs to be hearing and communicating. Now, if that person goes down or that person's busy, knowing the process of who's going to communicate in the absence of the company officer. Use plain English, again, common terminology, common language, and then, portray a positive image that you're calm and composed. Even if you're not, again, take that deep breath, think about what you want to say and then say it. Sound cool, be cool. So this is where we're going to get into the benchmarks. And I think Dan asked a question about what are some of the benchmarks from inside the building. So some of the three-step process that, you know, we use at the Institute, especially with the officer program, is all clear, under control, law stop. You know, if you're coming back to me and telling me that fire is under control with the picture we're seeing, we're not seeing the same thing. All right, we're seeing two different things, and that's where the communication process becomes skewed. So in this instance, we don't have an all clear, we're not under control, and law stop has not been obtained. So truly portraying the message, you know, we got heavy fire throughout the house, you know, we're in a defensive state. And even if you're defensive, that doesn't mean you can't move into an offensive operation once you have control of the building and you've made progress to make yourself able to go into the building. So some benchmarks that we always want to relay, and this comes from the officer program. What's the status of the fire? All right, if you're in the building, got smoke chugging out, give me the status of the fire. Do you have water on the fire? Have you even made it to the fire yet? And then the second thing is the status of the search. This came straight from the officer program of things that benchmarks that they like to see in every incident. So we thought it was important to translate through the communication processes. Status of the fire, status of the search.
And part of the benchmark process, as far as the incident commander goes, is hearing exactly what Matt had said: status of the fire, status of searches, and where things are happening in the building. But hopefully, you have a relationship with your dispatch center. If you don't, consider it, of giving you the time benchmarks. Because as an incident commander, you're not always watching the clock. So one of the policies that we have is about every 10 minutes, we get a 10-minute status. And dispatch just comes back and says, you know, incident command, you're 10 minutes into your incident. So that, based on those benchmarks from inside and the time benchmarks from dispatch, as an incident commander, you can start anticipating what's going to happen. After 10 minutes of hard work, you're probably going to start having your first companies come out. Do you have relief? Have you relayed and communicated your assistants to be there to relieve them as they come out? So all of that helps you formulate and communicate the next steps that you're going to need. If you're constantly going through companies and the status is inside isn't changing, are you going to change your tactics? And what other resources might you need to communicate that early enough for them to be there and continue your operation?
And really, you know, even with the status of the search, you know, if you got reported occupants trapped and, you know, you've come across a victim, getting that information relayed out to the outside of the building as soon as possible to make sure that there's somebody or an ambulance or a medical team to take that patient when you get there. Or if you don't have one is being called for you. So, you know, it's two important things to relay out when you're operating inside of a building. Again, some more benchmarks, all clear. The primary search is complete. You're under control. The fire is under control, but it's not extinguished. So you have control of the fire. You got 2 or 3 lines operating. It's not going to, you know, progress more than it is, but you are still working. And then law stop. You know, we've stopped any additional spread of issues to environmental or property. So our conservation or our property conservation has been completed. So again, this goes back to is what the incident commander, is what they're seeing, what's being portrayed to them, and being transparent. You know, if you're being transparent and you're relaying good information outside the building, it's less likely that that incident commander is going to bug you, might I say, while you're working. All right, so paint a good picture, paint a clear picture, and that make sure that that picture is what is being seen on the outside. All right, so for this one, you know, our initial on scene report. You know, you're on scene, you got a 3-story apartment building, fire showing from floor 3. We're leading on a line through the front door up to the 3rd floor for fire attack. We're gonna need a water supply, you know, truck 12's in command, all right? And then from there, can you conduct a 360? And did you conduct a 360? So when you get there, do you have anything that's prohibiting you from making a 360? Do you have locked gates? Do you have a large building that maybe you need a command officer to drive around the building? Getting that information out there about your 360, getting eyes to the back and the sides of the building is vital to our initial on-scene report. It's going to help us paint a clear picture. So that makes sense. 3-story apartment building, fire showing from 3, you're leading out of line, we need a water supply, truck 12 is in command. Status report. So are they solicited or unsolicited? Typically, this goes back to what I just said. We want to make sure that we're giving good information in a timely fashion to the people on the outside of the building that are making decisions. So again, what's your location? What do you have? What are you doing? And who's in command? Making sure that you're giving them good information based off of what your job tasks are. Transfer of command. All right, this is something that could happen anywhere. So what's the location of command? Again, that's typically going to be dictated through your guidelines, your policy. All right, if your command's in the front of the building in their command car, then going to that person, having that transfer of command, giving them the information of what do we have, what's currently happening, what are we doing currently, and what are we going to need. And then from there, verbalizing that command transfer over the radio so that everybody knows who's now in command. So typically this is going to happen from the first company officer to the first command officer. If the first company officer comes on the scene, they assume command. Let's say the chief arrives on scene. The chief might take command from that officer so that officer can regroup with their members. They're going to have this quick transfer of command. They're going to have this quick relay of information, and then the officer is going to go do his officer, and the incident commander will then move back to their position, their command post.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Quick question. Kevin had a question. How do you communicate with regular firefighters on the radio that don't have assigned numbers? Only the officers do. And what can I use instead of using their names?
Well, you always know that the names will work, but that's where the writing assignment might come into place. If you have, OV spots or the pipeman spots, whatever terminology is brought forth that you use in your department. Maybe it's engine 35 pipeman from engine 35 officer. Just that common terminology that's determined through guidelines and policies. And it's kind of a hard one to answer, but you're going to have to, without calling them by their first name, you're going to have predetermined position assignments through your guidelines and policies. I hope that answers Kevin's question. Again, another on-scene report. Engine 1's on scene, 12 Dwellmar. We got a 2-story structure, heavy fire showing from multiple sides. We're going to be pulling a 2.5. We need a water supply. Captain Smith is in command. So you're given an accurate on-scene report, giving everybody information. And then if your department, your first officer is responsible for doing a 360, making sure you're verbalizing that 360 has been completed. Or if you couldn't get all 4 sides of the building, maybe saying, hey, be advised, 360 is incomplete. We could only access the Alpha and the Bravo side. We could not access Charlie or Delta. Making sure that somebody knows that we got to get eyes to those other 2 sides that we couldn't get to on our first on-scene report. Here, before, this is a little video clip that Steve's going to talk about. Just realize the video might be a little choppy. It's not the video itself, it's the way it's being streamed through Zoom. But I'll let Steve take over. Steve, you there? I don't know. We lost Steve, but this is a fire that we had by us. So some of the things that we want to look at here is our tactics. So this is by us. This was very little communication happening. This was predetermined responsibilities at the beginning of shift that were defined through roll call. This is the officers from respective departments communicating in the morning time and allowing people to know what their responsibilities are. So this is the first engine on the scene. It's about a 90-second clip. You'll see that they get 2 lines and water on the fire before the first automatic aid department shows on the scene. So I'll let this roll. So as we let it roll, we're going to see we got 2 lines on the ground. We got water being established. So some of the things about as a first in officer or first in acting officer is, all right, you got a 2.5 car detached garage. We have multiple exposures here. We have an exposure to the adjacent house, the 2034, and we have another exposure to the house on the right. So that's things that we're going to have to think about. Are we going to go full, attack? Are we going to protect exposures? These simple tasks that we have to do. We really need to communicate them efficiently and effectively. So as we get water on the fire, we got a secondary line that's going to be had. We're fortunate enough in this video that we got a hydrant right on top of the engine. So the water supply wasn't a huge issue. But as you can see here, the tactics and the predetermined riding positions allowed this fire to be attacked by 2 lines within 90 seconds and fire under control prior to the first arriving automatic or mutual aid companies coming on the scene. So this is things that you need to think about and communicate. So whether it's defined communication from roll call or if it's defined communication from your tactics that are being given over the radio. So as you see on the left, the first truck got on the scene. All right, so things to think about it as you're moving forward with your communication process, either define them first thing in the morning or being able to announce them from this command buggy to the people arriving on the scene. All right, so radio. So there's different multitude of radios out there on the market. This is just one specific radio that we use in our area, which is why we chose to use it. We're not partial to one vendor or another, but this particular radio which we use was built for the fire service. It's got larger knobs, larger buttons, and it's easy to access and operate with gloved hands. So part of what you could do with your training program or as a quick drill during roll call is have your guys or gals operate radios with gloved hands on, change channels, talk on them, using the remote speaker mic, and just going through the process of using them with gloved hands on. Again, there's different head types. So head types meaning your remote speaker mic that's connected to the wire, which connects to your radio head. There's rugged, there's non-rugged. Some have displays, some have channel knobs, some have volume controls, some are noise canceling, some are not. The most important thing to realize is your cable type. Is going back, reading about your manufacturer's recommendations and what their capabilities and limitations are. For our specific radio, we operate it with an extreme temperature microphone cable. So the cable on the right is an extreme temperature cable. Typically, if you're using this style of radio, on the collar at the top of the 500 degree, there'll be an XT mark there. That'll signify an extreme temperature microphone. So as you can see in the blue, that where it connects to the remote speaker mic is about 500 degrees. And then where the collar is right below, it's 330. Then you got 500 down the wire until you get back to where it connects into the radio, and you're just below 300. Whereas you look at the standard cable is typically hovers right around 300-400 degrees across the cable itself. So, and when you look at and compare our radios to our other gear, it's actually the weakest link, all right? So how you wear your radio, where you place your radio is truly important to your operation of successfully being able to communicate. So with this particular speaker mic, this is in our area, you typically see more of the firemen, the task level workers with this specific microphone. It does have a little bit of noise canceling features. It does have the ability on the top to have an emergency button activated, and the push to talk button, which is on the side, and the black recess button is recessed so it's not inadvertently transmitting, and you're reducing your open mic possibility. Here with this particular microphone, in our area, it's typically more of like a command or administrative microphone. It's not rugged. It doesn't do well with water. And the push to talk button is protruding out from the side. And the knobs and the buttons are a little bit smaller. Here's where most of in our area, our company officers have these, and even our task level firefighters, the channel changing knob at the top is a little bit bigger. Your ability to have access to your emergency button is a little easier. and your push to talk button is recessed. The other thing about this particular microphone is it has 5 microphones in it. So depending on how the microphone is seated out of your coat or in your coat or however you wear it, it's going to allow you to have your voice heard, and it helps cancel out noise from saws or when you're forced indoors with loud things happening around you. So radio placement. I know this is like a big topic across the country. Everybody has their own ways of doing it. But there was truly a study out of Fairfax County, Virginia, that they studied how radios should be worn. And ideally, we want to be wearing our radios inside of our coat on some kind of strap with the remote speaker mic coming out of the top of our coat. And by doing this, it's going to allow the remote speaker wire to be protected by our turnout gear. So it's going to provide it that added level of protection from the thermal atmosphere around us. So when they did this, they looked at the radio utilization of a radio pocket versus a radio strap. So when in this particular side, we're going to talk about the radio pocket. So it was done with engineers. It produced the most signal loss. It produced a 30 decibel signal loss while crawling, and it diminishes the power of the radio, so its ability to transmit out of the building. In addition, it had a 40% ejection rate, so that 40% of the time in their study, this radio would come out of the radio pocket. And the melting of the remote speaker mic was more likely to happen based on it being hanging out of the coat itself. So when you look at this chart, you'll see that when it's on a radio strap underneath your coat, typically you have the best coverage. It's roughly on a 6-foot person, it's 33 inches off the ground. You lost less decibels and you were able to be heard better. With it in the radio pocket, you're roughly almost 5 feet off the ground and you had more loss in decibels. So what they're saying is that with it under the coat, it's typically right, the head of the microphone comes out right below your coat. It's my left, I'm not sure, but it's the person standing up picture. You'll see on the right of that box, you'll see the radio coming out right below the bottom of the coat with the antenna outside the coat. That's where they're getting up roughly that 33 inches off the ground mark. So ideally, this is the best way to wear the coat. The radio is underneath the coat, and you can see he got the remote speaker mic out of the coat and clipped onto him so he can communicate. On the one on the right had the poorest transmission abilities, and this is where the 40% rate came. When you put it in your radio pocket, you'll either have the cord dangling, or sometimes you see people will take that cord and they'll wrap it around their neck and then clip it in. Now, if you're standing up, and you're 6 foot tall, you've now taken one of the weakest links of our ensemble, put it 6 feet into the thermal atmosphere, and your likelihood of thermal damage has increased significantly. So using the radio. So this comes from the International Association of Fire Chiefs. So this is just some best practices of how to use the radio, when to use it. So typically we want to keep the microphone or remote speaker mic 1 to 2 inches from our mouth or our SCBA voice port. The voice ports typically are found on the side of our face pieces. There's some kind of circular, round circular piece on a Scott, and then in an MSA, they're typically in the front. Speak in a loud, clear, and controlled manner, and use the "Hey you, it's me." Hey, Dan, it's Matt. Wait for Dan to respond, and then give him or her the message. Shield the microphone. Yeah,
Matt. Just one thing to touch on that, because when we were talking about it on Monday, was the "Hey you, it's me," and give it a 2-second delay. Wait for a response. If you did not hear anything back, transmit the message again until you're heard. A lot of times, what happens is the message is delivered, but it's never received and repeated back. So what you assume to be given, "Hey chief, it's engine 1, we're on the 2nd floor, we have an active fire, we need another line." If you don't hear anything back, you should assume that the message was not received. So transmit the message until someone answers. That goes along lines with good communication, clear and concise, and that everyone is on the same page, because there's so much going on that some things get missed.
Exactly. And what Dan said is absolutely 100% correct, especially when, and if you're in a small department, or even a rural area where you're trying to keep track of multiple radio frequencies at once, you might not hear it. So, ideally, you engine 19 from command, you're going to wait for command to answer you. And then engine 19 to command, be advised, we have one line on the fire. We're making progress. We'll update you in a few minutes. You're kind of giving them that hey USB report. Again, shield the microphone. Use your free hand to muffle if you got a low air alarm going off, whether you're muffling the ringer on the air pack itself, or if you're putting a gloved hand over the microphone and then talking. Think about the location of your radios in relation to your low air alarm or your pass devices. That's just going to come with practice, sets and reps on the training ground, how you're going to wear your radio. It's things to think about. Even if you're currently wearing your radio and the remote speaker mic is right next to your pass alarm, maybe that's something you practice with your company or your department and see if that you can be heard while your pass device is activated, or if maybe you need to, regroup and wear your radio a different way. That's going to come down to guidelines and personal preference, but just realize that these outside factors will come into play and could decrease your ability to be heard if you're transmitting with a pass or a low air alarm going. So with this changing of channels, it's something that is going to be department specific. I know our area just did this as a drill last summer, and we found out that if we don't have the appropriate amount of people on scene, that changing channels is not appropriate right away. It's going to be one of those things that needs to be done in a controlled manner, and you have the ability to have multiple people available at the command level to communicate different incidents. So the Mayday incident or the emergency incident and the operation incident, yes, they're two different incidents, but if we don't have the means to change channels immediately, we have to give priority to the emergency or the Mayday. So non-essential traffic needs to stop until a controlled channel change can happen. Radio procedures, be familiar with your department's guidelines or your evacuation signals or tones. Some radios you can set off evacuation tones across the radio themselves. And then there's the old traditional way of the 3 blasts of the air horn. Knowing what your department's going to use, knowing how to do it, and knowing what that sound is when you're operating in the building is what you truly need to take out of this. So with the specific radio, we do have the ability to set it off between push the talk button and the orange button simultaneously. Again, I'm not going to get too into depth with this, but knowing what your department does and training on it when you get home and checking out the manufacturer of your specific radios that you utilize and if this is even an option for your department. Radio procedures, routine radios, avoid anything that's unnecessary. If we're clearing an automatic alarm, we don't need a 3-minute dissertation of that somebody burnt food and everything is good. Speak calmly and clearly, and again, use common language. Try to get away from 10 codes and things that are going to complicate your communication process. In an emergency, your dispatch center might hear an emergency or a Mayday activation or transmission before the incident commander. So, again, through your training program, seeing if that's the case and monitoring your radios. If the dispatch center hears it first, making sure that they can relay that information to the incident commander or somebody on the incident that can acknowledge the Mayday traffic. There's the traditional LUNAR, which is your location, unit name, assignment, and resources needed. And then within IFSI, we use a LIP, which is a little bit easier to use. That's your location, an identification of who it is and your problem. And then we're going to activate our pass and our emergency devices and wait for help. So in this audio here, we played from a RIC class that we held at IFSI, a brief transmission of a LIP. You'll hear the member give a LIP and then activate the pass device and be acknowledged.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. I have a low air emergency. I'm in a second floor bedroom. This is firefighter Mike Dade with engine 2. I was conducting a second floor search and I became disoriented. I'm low on air. I need air and I need help getting out of the building. Activate my pass alarm and turn on my flashlight.
This completes. Initiating a mayday.
So that was a LIP procedure being given out in a RIC class at IFSI. So lastly, we're going to talk about a personal accountability report. So when are we going to call these? You know, typically when we're backing out of a building, we have a change in just strategy from offensive to defensive. Some catastrophic event take place, an emergency evacuation or a mayday. So at some point in time where we need to gain control, regain control of the incident and be accountable for the members operating. So it needs to be systematic, and this is going to be driven by guideline and policy. The incident commander, the supervisor staff is going to request the PAR, and then even at certain benchmarks throughout the process, you could request a PAR. You know, so if you're coming out of the C side of the building and there's a C sector officer, you report to that person. You know, Engine 19, be advised, we have all members are accounted for, and then they can keep track and relay that information as well. That systematic process is really going to be depicted by or dictated by guidelines and policy, but just knowing that they can be asked and making sure that we have accountability for all of our members. And that's truly going to conclude. Here's some resources that we got. It'll be available through IFSI. And then again, thank you all for spending a couple hours here on a Saturday morning with us. Thank you to IFSI for giving us this program. And if you guys have any questions, we'll be available. Again, you know, thanks for taking time out of your morning to spend it with us.
Matt, thank you very much. Steve, he's lost his internet connection, but we'll get a hold of him. Thank you very much. Everyone, thanks for joining in and spending your Saturday with us. Just a couple things before you sign off. The next class is the Rural Water Supply, which is held Tuesday, May 26th from 6 to 10, and Saturday, May 30th from 10 a.m. to noon. You can refer to the IFSI website or any of our social media, Facebook, Instagram. Those links will be available. And also refer to the Facebook Live for upcoming events for the next month. That was also posted last night. If you registered multiple people through the Zoom and you put it in the comments, that's great. We also need you to have your chief or training officer send that roster in to that fsi-elearning@illinois.edu so that we can get you your certs. That's it. So thank you guys very much. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you again soon. Have a great Saturday.